Star Trek, Starfleet Academy, Chapter 17. Structural members as big around as my shoulder came crashing onto the table, and the table buckled. Ceiling material, bricks, and insulation rained onto Robin and me as we took a desperate dive and were caught in the edge of the fallout, driven down by our own momentum. A second later, another crash came, as the main lintels from the ceiling supporting structure came booming downward and drove what was left of the table all the way to the floor in a cloud of white, chalky dust. If we'd been standing around the table 2 seconds longer, we'd have been killed. Out of a wash of dusty wreckage, I pushed to my knees. "Robin, you all right?" I pawed at the wreckage and pulled him from under a slab of ceiling board. His face was pasty and caked with dust. "Okay. Wow, what happened?" Corin came crashing through the debris and lifted McGee out of a pile of cracked boards and support rods. "Oh, man, are you guys all right?" "McGee?" I turned to them and almost tripped. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said with a wince as Corin set her on her feet. "No, I'm fine." Commander Chekhov stumbled back toward us from the clutch of stunned cadets, all of whom now looked like ghosts of themselves, with their uniforms coated with dust. "Fine enough to explain this?" "The Vanguard, sir," she managed. "It was the Vanguard. They decided to take action." She looked at me. "I knew that meant action against David. I'm sorry, David. Their telepath figured out that I'd been talking to you. I guess she sensed that I was losing interest in their cause." Chekhov eyed me for a moment, then swung around to the other cadets. "All of you, clear this hall in case anything else falls. Someone contact the maintenance team and the security division. Dismissed." He waited as they cleared the area and filed out, but he motioned for me, McGee, Robin, and Corin to stay where we were. When all the other cadets were gone, he turned to me. "Well, cadet," he said, "it looks like the next move will be yours." Ow. Oh, what a headache. I pressed my hands to my head. This might have been a whopper of a hangover, but it wasn't. Sturrock sat in a chair directly in front of me and lowered his hands from my temples. "Fascinating," he murmured. I moaned and rubbed my eyes. I'd heard of the Vulcan mind meld, but it was a lot weirder than anybody had ever wanted to admit. Felt like bugs crawling around the inside of my skull. Seeming a little confused, Sturrock sat back and relaxed, but he was looking at me funny. "What's fascinating?" I asked. "Your thoughts," he told me slowly. "Warp speed equations, dilithium ratios, navigational symbols, photon variables, women with red hair, and cheeseburgers." I pushed out of my chair. All right. Just tell me if you think it worked." He folded his arms. "There is no way to be certain until you actually infiltrate the Vanguard and their telepath scans you. The conditions will have an effect. Your level of agitation, the temperature in the room, the quality of her telepathic abilities, the depth of her training, all these may compromise you. How well you control your thoughts will also be a factor, as well as how long she scans you." "But you planted a fake story." "I planted emotion reactions to the story you contrived. You should be able to call them up as you rethink the story. If you can do this at the right moment," he said with a warming tone, "you may deceive her." "It's got to work, Sturrock," I said. "We're both feeling the pressure of innocent lives out in space, and now I'm feeling the same thing right here at the Academy. If McGee hadn't warned us, 24 people could have been hurt or killed. Our actions have made the Vanguard up the ante. They want war with the Klingons, and they'll concoct a reason on their own if we let them." He stood up. "Take care of yourself, David. These are dangerously obsessed people." "I will. You keep working on the cyber ship. We've had more dumped in our laps than most cadets see in their first 5 years of active service. We have to get answers, Sturrock. We've got to give Captain Kirk a reason to keep the Federation from going to war." The Vanguard met off the campus in a former airdrome, where decades ago fixed-wing buffs used to hold shows of antique aircraft. Now the place was used as a public meeting hall, and the Vanguard enjoyed particular privacy here, situated in the hills outside of the city of San Francisco. They confiscated our communications before anyone was allowed to approach the building, so I was cut off from help. And it was weird to be among them. They were actually wearing robes and dark hoods. Hoods! Magia came with me to the meeting, feeling the Vanguard still hoped to win her loyalty as a victim of a Klingon attack. They might not entirely trust her, but to have an Andorian ambassador's daughter on their side was apparently worth a risk to them. They wanted to keep working on her. Ow, she's giving me a headache. I shoved away from the Vanguard telepath as she reached out, sifting through my mind. Frank Milan stood before Magia and me, armed with a phaser at his belt, and his expression said he just didn't believe that I wanted to be part of the Vanguard. I had a job on my hands. The telepath turned to Milan. I don't find much. I'm picking up a memory from 8 years ago. His uncle, Lieutenant Alan Forrester, was killed by a Klingon bird of prey while defending a colony. The colony was later. It was handed over to the Klingons, just like Baisia, I said. They attack and kill our people, and they get a colony for a reward. No matter what you think of me, Frank, I don't have to like what's happening any more than you do. Milan glowered at me. Yeah, sure. Magia might buy your story, Forrester, but I don't. Why do you really want to join the Vanguard? I wanted to join all along, I said. I just play Starfleet's game better than you do, Frank. Captain Kirk convinced me. Once we discovered it was a new Klingon heavy cruiser behind the attacks at Baisia, he was ready to go public. But Starfleet squashed him. How can I support the Federation after that? Then why'd you frame Faith Gage? I stepped closer to him and faced him down. That was personal, and you know it. She used a member of my crew for her own purposes, and she almost ruined him. She almost got Sturrock killed, too. What kind of a tactic is that? We can do better. Milan's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but I could tell he liked what he heard. Obsession was a funny thing. It wanted company. Pressing another step closer, I skewered him with my most sinister glare. The Federation wouldn't even bring up charges against the Klingons when they killed my uncle. He was just trying to defend Federation citizens, and they let him die without backup. Then they handed over the colony he died to defend. I'm just as sick of Federation timidity as you are. It's why I joined Starfleet in the first place, to turn back the tide before it's too late. Do you want to help or not? Other Vanguard members were gathering around us now and had heard what I said. I was careful not to look at any of them, but to glare only at Frank Milan, keeping the screws on tight and letting them know I was not intimidated. Milan glared back at me, deeply suspicious but now wanting to believe. If only he didn't hate me quite as much as he hated Klingons, I'd have an edge. He looked at the telepath, and she shook her head. I scanned him, Frank, she said. I think he's clear. I'm clear, I told him firmly, and I can deliver something you want. What? Milan challenged. Stepping back, I now swept all the Vanguard members with a single purposeful gaze. James T. Kirk, I told them. He'll come if I ask him. An excited murmur flowed across the field of hooded faces. Something flickered in Milan's eyes. Respect? I'd have settled for less. I turned to him before it faded. What do we do next? We do nothing, he said, recovering some. We'll wait until 0300, 1 hour from now. That's when Devolution Day begins. A cheer rang through the hall. Now what? What's Devolution Day? I asked. The end of the Federation as we know it. A cold shudder rang through my chest. How? I croaked. You'll find out when it happens. The countdown's already begun. When it's over, we'll be able to place James Kirk in power as the ideal for the new society. Even if he has any lingering loyalties to the old Federation, he'll step in anyway. He's that type. Frank, tell me what you're planning. Prudence should have told him to keep quiet, but Frank Milan wasn't the type to hold back. He was proud of himself, as he told me. A series of surgical assassinations at Starfleet. My mouth dropped open. Oh my God, you're serious. We're very serious, aren't we? A flock of troublemakers called out in support. No one leaves until after the detonations, Milan ordered. Bar the doors, the countdown is on. The crowd cheered. My stomach heaved. Now what? You're missing an opportunity, Frank, I said, barely aware of what was going to pop out next. You should inform Captain Kirk of your plans so he can join in the triumph. And he'll know there's no turning back and he'll accept your loyalty. Several of the other Vanguard members crowded closer, fascinated by the prospect of getting James Kirk on their side. They saw me as the link. Milan contemplated what I'd said, but the doubt lingered behind his gaze. Good idea. He handed me a standard-issue Starfleet hand communicator. You get Kirk over here, right now before the fireworks start. Then I'll believe whatever you say. McGee watched me wide-eyed. As I opened the communicator's grid, Milan drew his phaser and put it to McGee's head. Simple enough, message received. Knotted up like a braid, I raised the communicator to my lips. Captain Kirk, this is Cadet Forrester. I have special information. Come in, please. Chapter 18. I just can't bring myself to trust you, Forrester. Where is he? He said he'd come, Milan. So what takes so long? Frank Milan looked at his telepath, but she continued to shake her head and shrug. Milan had said there was an hour before Devolution Day, whatever they meant by that. Reactionaries, everything had to have a name, but they were proud of themselves for calling their petty destruction something other than petty destruction. Now 42 minutes had passed, 43. Only 17 minutes before bombs started going off in key quarters around Starfleet and key people started dying. It was inconceivable. I was starting to notice how sheltered I'd been in my life. I'd never been around people who wanted to kill anyone else before. A full 40 minutes had gone by before I really believed them. But their nervous excitement was telling, and McGee's silent eyes betrayed the fact that she believed every word. She had known enough misery and loss in her life that she knew the real thing when it came near her. They meant to kill. Their countdown was being ticked off on a portable computer unit that looked as if it had been hijacked from the Academy. Probably Frank Milan's personal contribution, settled in the center of the room, surrounded by nervous vanguarders. I was entertaining thoughts of rushing Milan in that phaser he held on McGee when a clack came at the wide barn doors of the airdrome, and the telepath rushed to open the door. Holding my breath, I hoped, yes! Captain Kirk strode in all alone. The whole room fell to silence. Kirk stood at the door, unimpressed by the throng of reactionaries. He started toward us. The only sound was the click of his boots on the hard concrete floor. Just when he would have come nearly to my side, he veered away and faced the whole room full of vanguarders. I hear there's a group here ready to take on the Klingons. He sounded rousing, angry, and the crowd reacted with a roar of applause and cheers. They'd suddenly gone from a splinter group to a powerful body with credibility. Sir, Milan addressed him, pushing McGee away. Your presence means victory to us. Kirk turned to him in his famous no-nonsense way and said, Get to the point. What's your plan? Sir, we've set up explosives in the offices of key Starfleet officials. Once those reluctant to act against the Klingons and Romulans are gone, we're ready to step in and restore order immediately. You'll be presiding over a new Federation. You better have placed your bombs well, Kirk said blandly. Federation security is no joke. Let's see your layout. Milan rushed to the computer table and scooped up a pad and handed it to Kirk. Kirk surveyed the information. He still hadn't looked at me or even acknowledged that I was here. Let's see. Looks good. Oh, yes, I've wanted to get rid of that guy for a while now. Incendiaries planted in Starfleet security, planetary defense, and the Federation Council. Very thorough. And H-hour is 15 minutes from now. You people have guts, Milan. I underestimated you. Thank you, Captain. We're honored, sir. Good for you. Kirk glanced around, then tossed the pad to me. Take a look, Forrester. You might learn something. The pad landed in my hands, and Kirk instantly swung away from me and started strolling toward the other side of the room, drawing with him the eyes of every Vanguard idiot in the place. You know what we're fighting for? He began with fire in his delivery. You know what the stakes are in a galaxy filled with murderers? I clutched the pad and sidled toward the computer setup. Ever since the Organian peace treaty, Kirk went on, loudly and forcefully, the Federation has been a wolf with no fangs. Hostile aliens nip at our heels and we cower back. Every day of peace brings us closer to the end of the Federation as we know it. And what do we do about it? Keeping my eyes on the pad, I edged up to the computer and tapped the remote access key, which connected the countdown sequence into the pad. Just a few seconds. The timer sequences began scrolling on the pad's screen. Kirk's voice continued ringing through the hall. He kept moving, never letting anyone settle their attention, creating a moving attraction for those who were infatuated by his presence. More shore leave for our enemies on Starfleet bases. More unaligned worlds brutalized by foreign landing parties. I say enough. You are the new blood that will stand up to interstellar assassins. Vanguard cheered wildly, intoxicated by the smell of power and a bloodlust I just couldn't understand. Traitor! A vicious scream pierced my ears from very close. The telepath was pointing at me, and the attention of the hall shifted from Kirk to me. He's trying to stop the countdown! She plunged forward and snatched the pad out of my hands. He blew out the timers! We're ruined! Milan bellowed. I knew he was lying. He speared his telepath with a glare. How'd he fool your probes? I don't know. He can't. Then her face changed, and she wailed. His science officer is a Vulcan. They must have set up a temporary shield. Well, the cover was blown. I swung around. Go, Magia! I shoved Magia out of the center of the crowd toward a wall, though there was no place to go from there. At least we wouldn't be surrounded. The telepath threw down the pad and drew her phaser, but Magia kicked wildly and knocked the telepath's arm out of aim, just as the phaser went off. The bolt seared the wall and the phaser tumbled from the telepath's hand. I lashed out and knocked down the nearest vanguarder, but two more rushed in to replace him, and they were rushing us. Any ideas? Magia gasped. You take the first dozen, I'll take the second. My miserable attempt at defiance was met by a boot in the chest. I hit the wall and came back slugging. Milan appeared out of the crowd, his face a quilt of anger, and he drove his knee upward into my midsection. I was thrown hard. My lungs were heaving. Doubled and completely winded, I staggered against the wall and tried to fend off the vanguard. But there were nearly 50 of them in here, and only the two of us. In seconds, Magia and I were tackled. The bombs! The telepath choked out her fury. What happened to the bombs? Frank Milan was crouched in front of the computer remote, his face twisting in rage. They're shut down! He blew the timers! Storming toward me, he let fly a backhanded slap that set my head ringing. Tell me how to fix him, you traitorous bastard! Dazed, I glared at him and actually smiled past a bruised lip. Fix him yourself, you self-righteous maniac. His teeth ground together, and he boiled with anger. I figured I was dead, but Milan didn't hit me again. Instead, he drew his phaser and spun it to Magia's head. The alien invader dies first. How do you like this, Forrester? Hold it! The sharp voice of James Kirk cut through the hall. The captain came slowly through the surprised vanguard. Disillusioned, Milan turned and pointed his phaser at Kirk. Please, don't tell me you're a traitor too. Not likely, Kirk said. Forrester lied to you, but he betrayed me first. If you want me to be your leader, his punishment is my call, not yours. Milan held the phaser up, but his jaw worked with unsureness. His arms quivered, and his legs shifted back and forth as he tried to decide what to do, who to trust. But for one who was so bad at trusting, such decisions came hard. He didn't know what to do. The fiery eyes of James Kirk never left Milan's. The steady gaze was disarming for the idealistic, if misled, young cadet. I knew the feeling. I'd have followed James Kirk off a cliff in those few moments if he'd asked me. He was like a magician rising from smoke and hypnotizing us, and Frank suddenly looked very, very young. Yes. Milan's voice was barely a scratch. Yes, Captain. Kirk held out his hand. At first, Milan didn't seem to understand, but then realized that Kirk was asking for the phaser. Overwhelmed, he handed the phaser to Kirk, and the captain turned the weapon on me. With the rest of the vanguard standing behind him, James Kirk aimed the weapon squarely at my chest. He extended the weapon as if he were about to shoot, then paused. "This isn't set to kill," he said. Milan blinked. "It's not?" Kirk slowly pivoted away, fiddling with phaser. "Why kill when I can wide-angle stun?" He raised the weapon and fired, this time facing the entire squadron of vanguarders. The whole room full of robed nuts collapsed in a single purple heap. Milan had been standing near me, out of line of fire, and now made a crazy dive for the telepath's phaser and scooped the weapon from her unconscious body. He fumbled briefly, then stood up in the midst of his collapsed fellows and raised his weapon. He looked up in time to see James Kirk's phaser aimed squarely at his head. "Put the phaser down, Mr. Milan." It was a standoff. Milan was wringing wet with sweat now, his plans destroyed, his hero betraying him, and his career in shreds. "Put it down, Frank," I said. "The Vanguard's finished." Kirk moved slowly toward him, phaser aim never wavering. "I could stun you," he said, "but I'd rather you make a decision." I wanted to believe, and any good cadet would, that this was just the power of James Kirk's mighty legend at work, but oddly I saw something completely different in Kirk's own eyes. He knew there was more going on. Perhaps that Frank Milan was an idealist and an enraptured young man whose beliefs had gotten the better of him, but that when it came down to actually pulling a phaser trigger, actually doing the killing himself with his own hands, the power necessary from the human soul was something Frank just didn't possess. I learned a lot in those few seconds, about Frank, about myself, about conviction, and about James Kirk. He was even smarter than his legend. Then again, the legend was in our minds. Captain Kirk was really here. Milan was both confused and overpowered by the intensity of Kirk's conviction. Up against that, Milan's petty ambitions didn't have a chance. Destruction of the soul, however, could be too much to bear. Milan cracked, yes, but not the way I expected. He turned his phaser away from James Kirk and put it to his own head. Kirk paused an instant, then walked toward Milan, and he lowered his own phaser. What an incredible move. He might as well have dropped his own weapon. He reached out to Frank like a stern parent. He said absolutely nothing. The only voice in the wide room was that of Kirk's strength of will. Broken and humiliated, Milan sank to one knee. His phaser fell away from his own skull. As James Kirk approached him, Frank Milan was a destroyed young man. And sad it was to see. Sad for me to watch a fellow cadet go down under the weight of his own misconceptions, so far removed from everything Starfleet stood for. Maybe in some ways Frank was right. Maybe we should be stronger, but his methods were all wrong. We couldn't go jumping to violent solutions at warp speed. How could anyone ever trust us if we did? How could we trust each other? As Milan wept at his feet, James Kirk turned to me. "Hurt?" I sucked a hard breath into my tortured middle and managed to say, "Yeah, it hurts," but I smiled around it. Kirk scanned the scene, satisfied. Then he opened his communicator. "Kirk to Starfleet Security, transport 2 teams to these coordinates. We have, looks like about 50 conspirators to take into custody." "Starfleet Security acknowledged, Captain. We'll be right there." Magia came to stand beside me, and she looked more satisfied and fulfilled than I'd ever seen her, as if she'd somehow avenged her lost family by saving the lives of others. That was a nice feeling for both of us. "Nice work disarming the bombs, Mr. Forrester," Kirk said as he took charge of Frank's phaser. "So much for another no-win scenario. Now you see why I don't believe in them." "Sir," I rasped, "I'm beginning not to believe in them either." "Good job. Don't be too satisfied, though. Sir, you're not done. You and Mr. Stark are going to throw your analysis into high warp. We've cut out the core of the Vanguard, but the Klingons are still angry about these activities, and someone is still attacking outposts. People are still dying, Forrester. It's up to us to find out who and stop them." Chapter 19. "I don't understand. We've got several different fragments, but they all contain the same set of etched structures. Apparently, there are old pathways and new pathways in the metal, with some that have been overwritten or blocked off. If I were a scientist like you, that might not tell me anything, but I'm a pilot and it tells me a lot. It suggests that something actually goes down those paths. David, they're simply too small. Only basic subatomic particles would be able to travel down these. There would be problems controlling the matrix. Well, let's find out anyway. That was what fatigue would get you, crazy guesses. Nothing could go down the things, so Sturrock and I were looking anyway. The etchings on the bits of junk from the new attack ship were meticulously engineered on a molecular level. It wasn't just random crystallization. That meant intelligence, not just a random attack by a big dumb being that looked like a ship. We weren't dealing with a galactic grizzly bear here. Sturrock was exhausted, even though he wasn't admitting it. His voice was thready, his movements sluggish, but he was driven to find the key to the cyber ship. I knew he felt responsible for the loss of the first set of data, despite the fact that logically he had nothing to do with that. No measurable change, he said dully, after our... How many experiments was this? No, I didn't want to count anymore. The results for protons and neutrons are the same. The simulation has failed. Poor Sturrock. I was letting him down. I wasn't being original enough or crazy enough or something. I had to be more creative. That wasn't in his bag of tricks, so it had to be in mine. I'm not willing to accept that. This thing is intelligent, and that means communication. We've got to find a way to talk to it. What if we try anti-electrons? He shook his head wearily. The matrix would explode. Matter can't exist with antimatter. So it explodes. What have we got to lose? He dragged his hands back to the console and arranged another piece of the fragment into the analyzer. First, antiprotons. The analyzer hummed, and then the plate exploded, blowing shredded pea-sized bits all over Sturrock. Sorry, you okay? I asked. He brushed the splintered junk off his cheek. Yes, as expected. Try the anti-electrons. But look, try it this way. Set it up to mimic the cybernetic patterns. Let's see what it does with something it recognizes. Sturrock blinked up at me. What is the logic for that? Well, if I want to speak to something, I speak in something it already knows, don't I? Let's see if it responds. David, any sentience may be an illusion. They could be cosmic parrots. Parrots don't build starships, and they don't attack colonies. This thing has a brain, and I'm going to find it. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he just didn't understand my stab in the dark, but he shrugged and tapped the computer console, feeding in my wild attempt to talk to the cyber ship's bits. This was like having one brain cell from a human being and trying to see if it spoke English. All we had to do was get a positive response, and Captain Kirk would be justified in demanding that Starfleet super geniuses take it from there and find a way to communicate. Who the hell are you, and why are you attacking outposts? David! Vulcan Reserve hit the floor. Sturrock jolted back and stared at the readout screen. Lights and neural responses scrolled wildly. It recognized the pattern, I cried. It's answering. Sturrock, we did it. It's not a spoken language, but there is a sentient pattern. That's the trick. We can't make it follow corporeal thinking, so we have to imitate its thought process. By mimicking a cyber ship's every move, a Federation ship can develop a rapport. Come on, we've got to get this to Captain Kirk. It is my honor and privilege to award Cadet David Ross Forrester with the Commandant's Medal of Meritorious Service and the Starfleet Call of Duty Award. I now confer upon you the rank of Second Lieutenant. Congratulations, Mr. Forrester. Cheers rose to the prisms of the ceremonial hall at Starfleet Academy, but I heard only the first surge of noise before my brain went a little numb. The field of cadets applauding me were in full dress for graduation. In the front row, in positions of honor, sitting with Captain Kirk, Captain Sulu, and Commander Chekhov, were my crew: Corin, Magia, Jana, Robin, and Sturrock. We were officers now. I looked at my crew and nodded. I was especially proud to see Sturrock wearing his Commandant's Medal of Achievement. He deserved it. In spite of our success, I keenly felt the stinging absence of Frank Milan and Faith Gage, much more than I'd expected to. Their dismissal had busted the chances of a 10-year no-expulsion record for Starfleet Academy, and I knew I'd had a hand in that. Oh, sure, they'd probably have caused a lot more trouble if I hadn't gummed up their works, but still, I felt saddened that the whole episode had to happen and regretful that I had to be part of it. The 2-story windows crackled with sunlight off San Francisco Bay as Commandant Roderot clipped the medals to my uniform and shook my hand. "Lieutenant," he said, "report to docking bay 12 at 800 hours. Your entire crew will be there waiting for you." "My crew, sir?" "Yes. Doesn't happen very often, but your entire command team has turned down their postings to continue serving with their training captain. Congratulations, David." Astonished, I looked down at Corin, Robin, Jana, McGee, and Sturrock. They seemed to know he'd just told me that. And all the feelings of regret fell away. "Docking bay 12, 800 hours. I'll be there, sir. We'll all be there." "This way, Mr. Forrester. You'd better learn the route." My legs were scarcely more than twists of thread as James Kirk led me into the one place in the universe I'd never expected to be standing, the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. This was the real starship right here, hovering in her box dock, which glittered outside the main screen like a Christmas decoration. Hovering here in elegant repose as we'd all come in under the docking shuttle. The starship glowed under the work lights like a swan in starshine. And the first thing I noticed as we walked onto the bridge was the scent of the place. Not like the simulator at all. The simulator smelled musty and sooty because of the frequent blasting that went on inside it. This place had a light aroma of tidiness, of freshly polished bulkheads and vacuum carpet. That's what happened to the starship every time she made port. Her crew, not maintenance from the starbase but her own crew, cleaned her up and made her shipshape before embarking for shore leave. Suddenly I wanted to buff something. "She's been in space dock for 6 weeks now, and she's ready for a shakedown," Captain Kirk said casually, speaking about the great ship as if she were his favorite riding horse. "Mr. Sturrock, right over there. Ensigns Corin and Acton, the helm. Ensign McGee, communications. Mr. Brady, main engineering, is right over there." I was shaken from my amazement by the sight in my periphery of Robin coming past me and running his fingers along the engineering console of the big ship. On my right, Sturrock stood at the science station, not touching it at all. It was as if he stood in a museum, appreciating the work of a great master. I smiled. I knew what he was feeling. Then it hit me again. This wasn't the simulator. Chekhov and Sulu came in after my crew, fondly touching the equipment, right at home here. My crew, though, wasn't sure at all what to do. They responded politely when spoken to, but we all were a little drugged. "Once around the solar system, Mr. Forrester," Captain Kirk said then, dropping to my side next to the command chair. Stunned, I turned to look at him. "Sir?" He waved his hand towards space on the main screen. "Take her out, shake her down, and then come back and pick me up in the morning. But be aware, if you bring her back with so much as a scratch, I'll file your ears to points." Was he talking about? He took my elbow then and almost scared me out of my skin. "Right there, Mr. Forrester, the command chair." He gestured to the all-important place as I stared in bald shock. "Take the command chair?" Behind him, Sulu and Chekhov were grinning. "Thanks to you," Kirk said, "we know how to communicate with the cyber ship. Your work with Mr. Sturrock is paying off. Tomorrow we're going out to deal with the crisis. You started this mission, and it's up to you to finish it." Overwhelmed, drawing strength from the supportive gazes of my own crew, I stepped up onto the command platform and lowered into the command chair as if it were hot and sizzling. "This is an honor, sir," I struggled. Kirk didn't smile. Exactly. But he held out his hand to me and clasped mine with unexpected warmth. Around us, the beautiful bridge shone, and its crews, past and future, beamed with pride as the torch was passed. On the bridge of the USS Enterprise, flagship of the United Federation of Planets, of which I was now a representative, Captain James T. Kirk clasped my hand a second longer than was necessary. He spoke to me with a resonance that would carry through my life in Starfleet, as ever long that would someday be. "Wherever you go," he said, "go boldly."